All right, before we get started with our episode, we are going to thank our awesome, stupendous, fabulous patrons. So we're going to...
Because you help us and you look good.
Yeah, you're beautiful, body and soul.
And even if you don't look good, you're paying me to say that you do.
That's inappropriate.
What?
All right, in the House of Earth, we have Rachel.
Ooh, Juliet Kurth.
Andrew Stocchetti.
Ali Silem.
Alexander Eagleson.
Aki.
And in the House of Stone, we have Tinkery.
Melissa Russell. Jane
Dominguez.
Krisha Doland.
Brianna Rains.
Allison Connors.
And in the House of Flame, we have Val Langlois.
Spaghetti Sandwich.
Pokela.
Natalie Curry.
Leah Harvell.
Kitty Grant.
J.S.
Francie Dillon.
That's my mom.
What's good?
Hi. Dirty Panda.
Cynthia Johnson.
Cheryl Eisenhower.
Celeste Grants?
Gantz.
Oh, Celeste
That's
Gantz?
my auntie.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah. Amber Costley.
Jade Smith.
Thank you all so much. Y'all are awesome. Again, we could not do this without you because, or rather, we would not do this without you because It takes time to put on this podcast. And so if you'd like to join the awesome people who are helping make this podcast possible, then go to patreon.com/Lindsey M Dillon. Thanks, bro.
Yeah, pog out.
Bros. Wait, as I said on my Instagram post the other day, witches, wizards, and non-binary spell slingers.
And especially acolytes.
Yeah, them acolytes, though.
They're hot.
They're awesome. This is The Mud Peddlers, a podcast where two nerdy ceramic artists share the behind the scenes of their worlds of clay. We are your hosts, Lindsey M Dillon.
And I am Donte of Earth Nation.
This week on The Mud Peddlers, we are catching up with Donte about his classes and kind of going over how his teaching style has evolved.
Yeah, I had to do an entire... So the way I teach my classes is essentially from the bottom up, but I always give a couple PowerPoints because I have like a projector and a projector screen. And then I always give them a presentation of like, here's information that you probably need to know that you're going to run into or that you're dealing with right now. So the way that I used to teach was I was essentially teach you a skill and then I would leave you alone. And I feel like a lot of teachers do that now where they teach you how to center. They teach you how to make a cylinder, if they can. And then they're like, all right, now make stuff.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, go. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Right? Like, leave me alone. But I'm part of the intermediate class. So what I still do but used to do instead of doing what I do now is I used to teach them that and then teach them a skill. So I'd be like, this is carving. Here is the best way to carve. Here are the stages. Here's how clay dries. Let's talk about the stages in which clay dries. And let's talk about the stages in which it is best to do certain things. Like, you're not attaching a handle in bone dry. But you need to know what bone dry is first before I tell you not to do that. So we talk about that, right? Okay. What I do now is I do a simple, very blunt, brute way of explaining things to them. The first or second class, because sometimes the first class is me going, you're in an intermediate class, respectfully, how many of you are intermediate, and how many of you just took pottery in high school when you came back after 10 years? You know, like, I'm trying to be nice about it, but...
Okay, so you basically found out that, like...
Half of them, at least.
Okay.
Are like, I am a beginner, but I took intermediate because I took a month of beginning classes.
Yes, like back in the day. Okay.
And then I'm like, well, let's see where you are at in comparison to the classes you used to take. And some of them are like, I can center, and I'm like, cool, throw a cylinder, and then it's kind of wonky, and I'm like, okay, so you're at like the precipice of you're still a baby potter. You're at like the precipice of beginner. Like a beginner knows how to center and pull a cylinder, and then some of the base shapes most likely, some of them, right? I don't expect you to know how to throw a lidded piece. I don't expect you to know the different types of lidded pieces.
Yeah.
A drop-in lid, a gallery lid. I don't expect you to know what a gallery is. I teach them that in the class. But if you don't know those things, you're most likely still a beginner. The chances are you're a beginner, right? And because of that, I have to teach the classes from a bottom-up level now, where I go, okay, the wheel is the first thing I say is the wheel is just a tool for making things round.
Yeah.
That is all it is. That is what a wheel is. It's electric now. It used to not be electric. We used to have to kick it.
Yeah.
Now, if you add a skill on top of making things round, you can make a thing. For example, if you want to make a cylinder or a teacup, is just a cylinder that you've trimmed. You need to learn how to pull. Pulling is just a skill. So making a thing round and then giving it height with pulling makes a cylinder, and that is a set of skills that gives you the ability to make a thing. Mm-hmm. After that, I give you the ability, by teaching you, to pull a handle and attach clay. Mm-hmm. That's another skill.
Yeah.
2 skills on top of making some round is a cup. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Because a cylinder with a handle on it is a cup. And this is the way I've started teaching now. We look at really complicated things too, like a double hump gourd. I'm like, this is just a cylinder that I've popped out and then choked in and then popped out and then choked in and then trimmed, but that's like 4 different skills.
Okay.
And every class I want to teach you at least 1 skill.
Okay, I think that makes sense because it seems like, because I think when you've talked about how you structure your teaching in your YouTube videos, it's that scaffolding thing. It's that idea that like, a lid is just a upside down bowl that you trim, you know. Yeah. So it's like, so you've talked before about like scaffolding.
Yes.
So the main difference between how you teach that scaffolding now is just recognizing that the level of skill that your students have is different.
Well, no, it's not just that. It's that instead of the scaffolding is essentially every scaffold is 1 skill. And then I point up to a 6th level scaffold and I go, that's a teapot. And every class, I'm going to teach you at least 1 level of scaffolding. And then in between the scaffolding, we need to talk about the problems that you're going to come up with. So instead of just scaffolding and then going figure it out, now I go, here's the problems you're going to deal with.
Okay, so before you were more like teaching them the skill and then within the class itself, dedicating more time for them to like futz with it and like see if it works.
Yes.
Okay, and so more like proportionally more of the class now is like more of the PowerPoints, more of like the going through. Okay, that's interesting.
There's one where we talk about cultural significances and the difference in between, because clay is across the world, right?
Yeah.
But we start talking about the differences in between how being raised in a geographical area, and I say geographical area specifically because I don't want to be like the Chinese.
Oh,
you know what I mean? But like if I'm talking about ramen bowls, which are obviously very like Chinese or Japanese, right? If we talk about, okay, we know how to make a bowl. We have figured out how to make a cylinder. That's a skill. We learned how to pop clay out. That's a bowl. We need to learn what a bowl is through the cultural lens of different geographical areas and people over time, right? So when we talk about something like a matcha bowl, we talk about a matcha bowl because they clearly had the availability of green tea in that area. They could then condense it and purify it, make it into matcha, which is just really strong green tea. And then they started making...
It's the actual ground up tea leaves themselves. Because other teas, you're steeping the tea leaves. You're not actually consuming the tea leaves.
Right. This is like
matcha is like you're actually eating the leaf, essentially.
Yes. And so they started making an item that they could then whisk the matcha into a bowl to drink the tea out of. And that is essentially, a very razored down version of what a tea bowl is. And then I teach them a little bit of history about the tea bowl, and I show them like, hey, this little spot in the middle, it needs to be flat for these reasons. It needs to have these sides. It needs to have a V-tapered bottom usually, so it fits in the hands when you cup it because it's a V shape. And then at the end of all that, they're like, wow, that seems hard to make. And then I go, no, it is a bowl. It is just a bowl. I want you to keep in mind it is a bowl. And then we talk about I think it's called a quake or a quaich, which is a Scottish bowl in which has 2 little sides at it. It's a drinking bowl, essentially.
Oh, okay.
I feel like I'm saying it wrong because I'm not Scottish.
Ooh, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know how to pronounce it again.
But I put a picture of it, and it has these fine detailed carvings in it, and we have all this, and it clearly has a very deep cultural significance. And they're all like, wow, that seems hard to make. And I go, no, it's not hard to make. It is a bowl with carvings in it and 2 little handles on the side. That is what it is. And then I really try and whittle down or razor down the factors of like, I've taught you a skill. Here are the additive scaffolding skills that you need to get to this point. I just need you to understand the problems that you're going to go through when you get to that point. So one of the major ones we talk about that everyone seems to like is how your clay gets tired. Because there's like 3, 4, arguably 5 variables in which make your clay tired.
Yeah.
It's like the time in which you're working with it, how fast you're going on the wheel. I teach them the fixes to it, the absorption rate of your clay body. Yeah. If you're working with stoneware or porcelain, all affect the variable in which how much time you have.
Yeah, y'all remember the cream cheese throwing challenge?
Dude.
That's a good example when you think about like how different textures of clay affect how easy something is to throw. If you've ever thrown with porcelain and tried to make something really wide and then color it back in, that's rough.
It has no give because it usually doesn't have grog in it, right?
So it just flops.
I said grog, and they're like, "What's grog?" And I was like, "No, I gotta do a class on that." And so I'm teaching them all the little itty bitty things now.
Yeah,
so on top of the scaffolding, I'm also teaching them how to stabilize the scaffolds, as it were. Where like you're going to run into this problem. So instead of making one presentation, the general way I teach my class now is I say, good morning, here's what we're going to do today. I pull up the PowerPoints, I teach them the thing. After I teach them the thing, I say, okay, I want you to try and make this today in about an hour and a half. We're going to do another presentation, and we're going to do another demo. Or sometimes I stack the presentations.
Okay, yeah.
And then I say, and then in about an hour, we're going to do another demo.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you exactly what I meant by the last presentation. So I let them mess with it for a little bit. And then I go, okay, here's the problems you guys are running into and what you're going to run into.
Yeah.
Let me show you how to fix them real quick.
Okay.
And I'm noticing a lot of, because I'm trying to look around, a lot of teachers will just teach you like a third level scaffold skill and then be like, all right, go. That was enough. Go.
Yeah.
But of course the scaffold matters. Like, here's a good representation. Making a teapot is just a jar, and then
a lid.
A lid, right? A lid is just kind of like a flat plate or upside down bowl, and then you learn how to attach clay and pull a handle, and that's what the handle is. And then you learn how to throw a little spout, and that's what that is. That's not the end of a teapot. We have to make the filter.
Yeah.
We have to make not just the filter. We have to make a good filter that has proper placement, and then we have to make the channel, which means we have to wet a little painter's brush, or we have to wet the end of our pen tool and stick it into the teapot to make a proper channel so the water flows out correctly. Those are the things I'm starting to teach now.
Interesting.
Intermediate knowledge comes with those things. Beginner knowledge comes with, you can make a form. Right? Intermediate knowledge comes with the little bits of things that make craft work good and make it an easier throwing experience for yourself. And so that's the second PowerPoint that I'm usually doing. It's like, okay, here's what we're going to talk about as a main thing, and here's the itty bits that you're going to run into.
Yeah. How much time would you say now that you put into creating each of those presentations? Like now that like the presentation aspect is like taking up more time in each class, like how much time would you say that it's taken to put together your presentations?
The presentation time doesn't take that long, to be honest with you.
No, I mean like for you making the presentation.
Oh my God.
Not like giving the presentation, but like when you're actually like preparing the slides for the presentation.
About 2 or 3 hours. Takes about half the time it does to make a video.
Okay.
To make and edit a video. Like if I had no distractions, like baby wasn't here.
Yeah.
Wife wasn't like, take your pants off. Stuff like that. So that's essentially what I'm doing now. Like I just realized I need to teach them how to glaze. They don't know how to glaze. I'm sorry, correction. They think glazing is only brush and bottle.
Oh, so they've never even like dipped?
I taught my class how to dip last class.
Interesting. Okay.
They don't know wax resist. A lot of them don't anyway.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. So how many classes have you had so far? Because this is still only within your very first...
This is my second round.
Oh, this is your second round.
I had 2 students, and then I think what happened is the word got out I was teaching classes, and people who couldn't jump on the train last time
jumped on the train.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought you were still in like your first session. Oh. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
I have 6 students now, and I can have a maximum of 8.
Hell yeah.
It's 8 before like the class is like, that's too many people.
Okay. So did you implement some of these changes like within that first group, or did you kind of? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like one
part just for like reference, part of the reason I'm curious is because like
I learn as I go for sure.
Yeah. Well, also like figuring out like, okay, when to implement something versus when to like stick to the plan for the sake of like cohesion, but then it's like when is new information better than things being cohesive, if that makes sense. Like I just find like the practice of like how you create your syllabus essentially and how you create like the structure of your class is really interesting. That's why I'm like asking all about it.
I do have one person specifically who really wants a syllabus, but he also doesn't know what he wants, if that makes sense. So I have an idea of what I need to teach, and there's 2 problems.
Okay.
This might go on a bit, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I'm here for it.
So like the main issue with me is that the class is only about a month and probably a little more, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And like a month and a day.
Yeah. Because you added that 5th class.
Of no charge. I'm not adding any more money. It's just, you need another class.
Yeah.
So the classes are essentially a month, right? It's 4 classes for 3+ hours. I usually stay a little bit longer. I try and give them a little more time to clean up and whatnot. it is very difficult to give someone an intermediate potter's education in one payment of classes for a month worth of time, which is arguably about, 4 times 3, 12?
Yeah.
12. You get 12 hours to become an intermediate potter if you're not already.
Yeah.
And if you are an intermediate potter, you get 12 hours to learn everything I have to teach you.
Yeah.
And it's simply not enough time. It's really not enough time, especially considering that I was an intermediate potter for 6 months, for 2 classes, 3 hours a day in college. And so my knowledge of what I think intermediate is like far beyond the scope of effing 12 hours.
Yeah. Like there's no way that you can take a 12-hour class and then suddenly you are an intermediate potter. Like you get in my, like, kind of how I view it is like you are in these 12 hours, you are giving people the skills that they need to practice being an intermediate potter. And again, like, we're saying intermediate within, like, our own definition of intermediate, but admittedly, there's not, like, some grand council that determines what an intermediate potter is.
There's no ground council, but I will say there's clearly, like, for lack of a better term, a gate to entry to be intermediate. And they might not correlate all the time, but, like, if you can't throw a bowl, I'm not going to call you an intermediate potter.
Sure, yeah.
But, like, you know, if you can pull a handle, that's like I wouldn't say a high beginner, but that's a pretty beginner basic skill. But if you're someone who makes the hell out of cups and you throw like a madman and you're using an extruder and you've never pulled a handle in your life, I'm also not going to call you a beginner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's clearly cracks, or there's clearly like exceptions to the rule, but I don't want to announce that exception to the rule and claim it as if it is the rule. Like, the exceptions to the rule are not the rules.
Right.
You know, when I talk about intermediate stuff, I'm talking about the generalization of, like, I get to the intermediate stuff and I go, okay, we're going to make a bowl today. And then 3 of them are like, I can't make a bowl. And I'm like, shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got to backtrack a little bit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So we got to do a presentation and a demo on bowls, which then takes like an hour to, you know what I mean? So it's stuff like that. And I think what happens in my classes, people take a month of beginner classes and go, I'm an intermediate. And I'm like, well, not really. Kind of, not really.
Yeah.
I can make you intermediate if you take my class. But as you are now, like, I think you just know how to center and throw a cylinder, and that's it. Like, that is the extent of your class.
Yeah.
So when I had to do a class on glazing, I was like, okay, you can spray, you can dip, you can paint, here's the different firing techniques, here's coated. Like, I explained the difference in between oxidation and reduction in a class.
Nice.
And they were like, that's it? And I was like, yeah. That's it. One person even was like, so all of our kilns in this, I was like, they're all oxidation.
Yeah.
Except for our Raku kiln out there, which is arguably reduction. But, like, it's Raku's, it kind of belongs in its own special category, realistically.
Yeah.
But it does use fire and gas.
Yeah.
Most of the time. And they're like, oh, okay. So the kiln I get at home, I said, is it run on electricity? I said, yeah. I said, it's probably oxidation. They're almost synonymous with each other.
Yeah.
And they were, a lot of them were like, oh. That's the difference.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm like, intermediate people know that already before they get here.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to down you, but that's, like, once you learn it, that's a super common thing. And then I showed them a couple slides on, like, here's what happens in oxidation, here's what happens in reduction.
Yeah.
And then over the next 30 minutes, we talked about the difference in the chemical reactions with oxygen and reducing the amount of oxygen and how it affects your clay body, such as copper turning red instead of keeping green in an oxidation versus a reduction firing. And I explained how if you reduce the amount of oxygen in a chamber, in a kiln, right, the oxygen or the combustion source, the fire, has to find oxygen from somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's not getting it from the air, so it takes it from the clay and the glaze. And that changes the visual aspects of it. Like, and they were just like, oh! They're like, yes!
Oh, that's great.
I heard one person whisper, she's like, this is already better than my college classes.
Hell yeah, dude.
And I was like, are your college teachers not telling you this?
No, dude, there's so much about the technical side of ceramics that doesn't get taught. Like, all of the stuff that I learned about, like, how to load a kiln. Like, I mean, like, some basic stuff about glazing, sure. Like, I learned that. But, like... Yeah. I think it kind of depends it depends a lot on the teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, like, I learned about oxidation versus reduction firing, like, when I was at Sac City.
Right.
You know, but, like, how to load a kiln, or, like, the more, like, behind-the-scenes stuff that you need to be a potter on a more, even, like, at a hobbyist level, like, the things that you need to know how to do.
Yes.
I think. Or the things that help your experience if you know how to do them. Yeah. Those are things that often don't get taught in college, from what little experience I have and what little anecdotal evidence I have. But
there's one guy that's there who's he's really, really interested in gaining tools, like skills, so that he can do his own thing, but he doesn't know what he wants to do. So we had like an hour-long discussion, and I felt bad because the other students were looking at me like, can I get some help over here? Well, I'm talking to this guy in depth, and he's really engaged, and I don't want to leave him because I'm trying to figure out what he needs from me. So I can satisfy his needs. But he's just like, yeah, I'm really interested in this, and this, and this. And I should have given him homework. I should have been like, your homework is to find out what style of thing you like. And then come back to me and tell me so that we can then delve into those skills.
Yes.
Because at the moment, you're giving me a lot of like, I like this, and this, but I don't know what it is. And then I'm guessing, and you're like, that's not it. And I'm like, well, if you don't know what it is, I don't know what it is.
Oh, and balancing that with like other students. That's like that's one of those things with teaching that's always kind of made me like anxious, is like figuring out how to balance my time with students to make sure that everyone's needs are getting taken care of to the best of my ability, right?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Yeah. So how are you finding that, like navigating that balance between different students' needs, especially knowing that like the level of what intermediate is to people varies a lot?
It does vary a lot. There's not a lot of classes that are specifically intermediate, advanced glazing. There's like beginner, and then they leave you alone. Yeah. So when people go for intermediate classes, they're hoping to get an intermediate education. I thought in my mind that I would get potters that were already intermediate and that I would be adding to their education, and I would slowly make them advanced. School, when you're in school, you take beginner pottery, you become a beginner potter. Yeah. And then you're going into intermediate, and then you become intermediate. Yeah. And then you know, so on and so forth. I kind of thought that people would come in with a full knowledge of beginner knowledge. Gotcha. Yeah. And so they were ready to become intermediate. But what's happening is that my standards of intermediate are kind of advanced to them. Yeah. So I'm having to teach them almost beginner skills and then sprinkle in intermediate stuff. But I'm talking about like the core chemistry of a lot of things. We talk about clay platelets a lot. And so they now understand, okay, so that's what clay is made out of on like a structural level. Yeah. And this is how it works. And this is what wedging is. And this is what wedging does. I remember there was one time I try and stay really professional, but there was one time that I was like, stay off Facebook! Stay off it! Like one of them is very like, yeah, what about this? And I'm like, stay off Facebook. And she's like, how do you know I'm on Facebook? I'm like, I can smell it on you.
I love that.
Stay off Facebook.
Unless you're going to the Facebook, what is it? Because there's the Clay Buddies. Clay Buddies is a Facebook clay group. Yeah. And they're good. We like Clay Buddies.
They're good because Tim C will come out of nowhere and be like, that's wrong and you're dumb. But like...
For support. But I hear what you're saying.
A lot of them are, you just got to be careful because they'll be like, yeah, I heard from a friend of a friend from my grandma's aunt's uncle who bought a cup from Apple Hill. Who put a copper green glaze at 1% in the dishwasher and it came off and it turned white. And I'm like, no, it didn't. What's in your dishwasher? Acid? Like, what do you... Yeah. And you soaked it for a week? What's going on there? Like, that's not... Like, you're lying. You're lying is what's happening.
That kind of reminds me of, like, something I've heard about, like, wedding planners. Is that wedding planners say, like, don't go on Pinterest because it's real easy to get real overwhelmed and want to do all the things and end up getting, like, all the choice paralysis. But anyway, I've just been thinking about weddings a lot because I had a bunch of friends get married. Anyway, it's very exciting.
I do know I have another student joining us next time, and I will fully admit that I've added on, we talked about an extra class, but that extra class is going to be, like, get as much work as you want in now. Because I know that I took... like an hour of the 3 hours every class to teach you something, and then I probably took an extra 30 minutes to throw with you and like teach you and demo for you. So like this class is going to be probably 2.5 hours of do whatever you felt like doing. Ask me any question you want. Bring food. Yeah. It's going to be like a secret little potluck. That's fun. For the 5th class. I want to make it fun. Yeah. I want people to ask more questions. Because what often happens, like there's one person who's really interested in food safety and glazes. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, it takes a whole nother sector of classes to explain that. Yeah. And she goes, okay, what about crazing? And then I tell her what crazing is. It takes like an hour to explain crazing in depth. Yeah. And then she asks like, but, and I'm like, don't worry about that. And then she's like, what about this? And then I explain that instead of 20 minutes. Yeah. And yeah. I love the questions. The problem is that those are like, for lack of a better term, advanced questions. Yeah. I mean, knowing what causes crazing is realistically intermediate, but like if you're making your own glazes and comparing it to the thermal expansion of your clay bodies and then picking your clay bodies so that it correlates correctly so you don't get crazing, that's a bit advanced to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely don't know how to do that.
I don't want to say it's advanced because then I put myself in a marker of advanced because I know how to do that.
Well, yeah.
I think I'm like adept. I don't know if I'm advanced, but I'm definitely like higher than or intermediate, lower than advanced.
Well, I guess what I could say is that like if someone has never even made a glaze yet, it kind of makes sense to be like, all right, don't worry about the thermal expansion quite yet, because just get used to making. It's kind of like you're not gonna make souffle before you make chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
I guess
it's true. Yeah. No, that's fair because chocolate chip cookies are fairly easy to mess up and make.
Yeah,
but like a souffle is. I made one 2 weeks ago, and I was like, "This is super easy to mess up. You could mess this up real bad. If I yelled at this real loud, it would collapse."
That's the joke with souffle.
Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, but if you are interested in making that souffle, then we can do the research and have fun and go for it. But it'll just probably be easier if you make the chocolate chip cookies first.
Well, they have a lot of intermediate questions, and I answer them because I have the answers to them. I think the issue is that like my brain goes, you should probably learn how to throw a straight cylinder before you worry about the thermal expansion. Yeah.
Do you have any do students get access to your slides as part of the class, or do you have is there anything that you can give them to like help with them remembering that stuff so that they're not
y'all take notes. You could take notes.
Okay, that's fair.
I've seen 2 or 3 people in the class take notes because I say something that they're like, oh, this is important. Like I call it like, I don't call it that, I guess I'll call it that now. It's core knowledge.
Yeah.
Where it's like no matter what you're doing, this applies to all of your work.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So when we talk about how clay gets tired, they're like taking notes. 2 or 3 of them are like taking notes.
Okay.
Which I actually really appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like, thank you, because I did a lot of hard work to do these.
Yeah.
But I have started thinking about, no one sell my idea. I will find you.
Tell me.
I have started thinking about putting my slides that I make for my classes into like an online class.
That's a great idea.
And then they can just buy those. And then like making a presentation maybe. Just doing what I do in class and just selling them.
No, honestly, like that is what a lot of artists do. Like, I mean, shoot, like I took a Hammerly's class on like intro to slip casting, and it's just, I mean, well, for that was like an actual like video thing.
Yes.
But like, like you could.
I just buy a green screen, stand in front of it, put the slide behind me, and then point at things as
I think that's a great, because you really do so much for free that I think it's okay to make some content that is that people pay for.
Yeah, I mean, I just have to find a way that's not YouTube giving me pennies on the dollar, essentially.
Right.
YouTube is very like, oh, 1,000 people watched your video, here's 10 cents.
Yeah.
My patrons really keep things going. Like if I buy a shelf for like $200, it's patrons that are keeping that good. My projector screen. I remember one time my car broke down. It cost like $1 to fix. Patrons paid for that.
Yeah.
And it was good.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
It's huge.
Without them, I would not be here. I feel like they should get more content and more stuff, but also at the same time, like they have a skew of forbidden videos that nobody else can see. They also get pottery every month.
Yeah.
And like I give them blogs and I give them extra info and extra pictures and
you do a lot for your patrons.
I don't post as much as I should, I'll say that, but at least once or twice a week they get something that's like
That's a lot. That's a lot more than a lot of people do for Patreon.
Yeah, I do see a lot of other people's Patreons and they're just like abandoned for months and months and months at a time. But people forget, Yeah. I feel like I've talked a lot. I'm sorry.
No, this is good because it's interesting to hear about like how you're adapting to what you're experiencing teaching in person, because again, you've done online teaching through YouTube for so long.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, that like doing it in person and like dealing with some of those elements, like you are getting active feedback from your students about what they need, and that's kind of different than posting a video and then sure, like you get comments and stuff, but it's a different experience. So it's interesting to hear about how you're like what information you're getting back from your students and then how you're adapting to those changing dynamics. It's interesting to hear about. Hopefully y'all like hearing it too.
It's interesting to see their needs in front of me. It's very interesting to get like out of left field questions because I get weirdly proud of them.
Aww.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
They improve almost every time. It's wild to me that like in a month and a half of classes, 2 of them are making like 6-inch cylinders in one pull.
Hell yeah.
And like they could make a straight cylinder to save their lives the first time I met them.
Oh my god.
There's one person specifically that was making these like regular sized bowls out of like 4 pounds of clay.
Uh-huh.
And at one point I was like, just give me half of that.
Yeah.
But make the same size of bowl. And she did.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I've been using double the amount of clay. I'm like, yeah. So your 25-pound bag is now 12 pounds to you.
Yep.
And then we talked about recycling clay.
Oh, nice.
So that if you buy a 25-pound bag of clay, you are getting 25 pounds worth. If you are not recycling your clay on some level, whether you do it by rehydrating it and then re-wedging it or just re-wedging the wet stuff, you're essentially not getting 25 pounds of clay every time you buy a bag.
Yeah.
You're getting like 15 or 20. You're wasting poundage.
Yeah.
Right?
Never waste poundage.
Nobody wants to ever waste poundage.
Nah. You take all of it that you can deal with.
You paid for it, you sit and spin.
What? Oh
on
my
the
god.
On the wheel. On the wheel.
Yeah.
And now it's time for our kiln plug. Just your kiln hole, we're just gonna plug it in there.
Yeah.
Right? We're gonna make sure you know what's up. We're gonna cover it up. We're gonna keep the heat in.
This is a really particularly spicy episode today.
That's what a kiln what? I didn't do nothing wrong. That's what a kiln plug is for. You plug the hole, you keep the heat in, you make it hot.
Alright, so what do we got to plug, my dude?
Okay, so my next store update is actually fairly soon. It's going to be in the first week of October. I planned it for October 1st, actually, but I just want to give it a little bit of leeway time. I will be posting on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube when it actually comes out. Make sure you have notifications on.
Good, because this episode is going to be coming out on October 2nd.
Damn, that's crazy. It's probably out already.
It's probably out already, but now you know.
Now you know.
And if you didn't know, then you can sign up for notifications.
Just push the notification. Yeah.
Or do you have a newsletter? I forget.
I don't have a newsletter, but I have everything but that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, my kiln plug is my Halloween update is going to be on Friday. No, I'm sorry. It's going to be on Saturday, October 14th. And if I get my shit together in time, I will do a early release for my newsletter subscribers. So I do in fact have a newsletter, and I'm going to try and get things set up so that newsletter subscribers have access on Friday the 13th, guys.
We don't have actual sound effects. We gotta make them ourselves.
Yeah, we do. I mean, I could find some sound effects.
Yeah, we could, but
like,
it's
just better if we make them ourselves.
We crafted our sound effects.
Yeah. We're pretty cool like
because
that.
we're crafters.
Yeah. Anyway.
Also, do keep in mind that Lindsay and I have a table not together, but in the same building at SAC Anime Winter,
which is January 5th, 6th, and 7th.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Also, last part, I do have a discount code with Clayscapes. If you're buying Clayscapes glazes, I'm not being paid to say this, I just want you to save some money. Use the code EARTH10 when you buy their glazes at checkout. Save yourself money. Lindsay bought some glazes, forgot to put the code in. She's regretful.
I am regretful. I am filled with regret.
Yo, you could be filled with glaze if you use the discount code, though. We're very sexual.
We should go back to having explicit episodes. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Mud Peddlers. We would love to hear from you, so if you want to share your thoughts about the episodes or just see what Donte and I are working on in our studios, come say hi. You can find links to my social media at lindseymdillon.com. That's LINDSEY, M as in monster, DILLON.com.
And you can visit my pottery shop or see what I'm working on at earthnationceramics.com. And you can find me all over social media at Earth Nation Ceramics. It's spelled exactly how you think it's spelled.
And if you want to support the show, hear some bonus episodes, and see some behind the scenes of my work, you can support me and the show at patreon.com/Lindsey M Dillon. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.